Welcome everyone to the Canarian International Meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. My name is Mossy and I am an alcoholic.
And my name is Mick. I am an alcoholic. We're both serving as your secretaries today. Please join us in a moment's silence to remember the still suffering alcoholic, both inside and outside this meeting.
Philip, you can unmute yourself there, Philip.
Yes, good evening. My name's Philip. I'm an alcoholic. Alcoholics Anonymous is a fellowship of men and women who share their experience, strengthen each other, that they may solve their common problem and help others to recover from alcoholism. The only requirement for membership is an honest desire to stop drinking. There are no dues or fees for AA membership. We are self-supporting through our own contributions. AA is not allied with any sect, denomination, politics, organisation, or institution, does not wish to engage in any controversy, neither endorses nor opposes any causes. Our primary purpose is to stay sober and help other alcoholics to achieve sobriety.
Thank you, Philip. And a very warm welcome goes out to anyone new to Alcoholics Anonymous or anyone returning. And that's it, folks. That's our introductions done. This evening, guys, we have two speakers who are going to speak for about 30-35 minutes each. And we're going to kick off with lots of love this evening. David, you'll be first off. Where are you going away? Oh, there you are. David, you're first off. And thanks a million for joining us today. I'm really looking forward to hearing yourself and Don today. And you're all very welcome. You should be unmuted there, David. Yeah?
Okay, there we are. I was trying to unmute myself. I'm getting ahead of the game here. I'm David Love. I am an alcoholic. And I always start with that. And some people say, why do I use my last name? Because so few of us do. And there's two reasons I do it. Number one, my sponsor does it. So that's the main reason I do it. But I also do it because Dr. Bob, he said we could be too anonymous within our own meetings. And I really believe that. I hadn't been to in-person meetings for quite a while because my wife had been ill, and I may talk about that some as I go along, but and she passed away a few months ago. But so I started going back to in-person meeting, and I got a new home group, which is the Horseshoe Group. I'm in Columbia, South Carolina. I'm from Northern California, but that's why I don't have a South Carolina accent. But so I was getting men's names, to put in my contacts in my phone. And so I was asking this guy his name, and he said, my name is Jim A. So I'm talking to him, he doesn't even want to give me his last name, even not in the meeting. And I said, what's going on? Anyway, that's my story on my last name. I know none of you cared, but it's interesting. I always start with this, or try to start with this. My sobriety date is October 27th, 1995. And I'm going to take just a second to allow God into this meeting. God, I offer myself to thee to build with me and do with me as thou wilt. Relieve me of the bondage of self, that I may better do thy will. Take away my difficulties, that victory over them may bear witness to those I would help of thy power, thy love, and thy way of life. May I do thy will always. Amen. Okay, so, our book says our stories disclose in a general way what we were like, what happened, and what we are like now. And somewhere along the way, some really smart alcoholic thought it sounded better to say what it was like, because that's really what most of us say, right, when we say it. And I tried to change it my whole life, and I was never very good at that. So I'm going to talk about what I was like and what happened and what I'm like now. And I lived my life pretty much as a wretched person. I lived my life on self-will. I did whatever I wanted to, most of the time. I mean, I was married a long time, so you take family into account. But most of the things, just as an example, and unfortunately, I'm not going to talk about my wife because she's gone now, but she was not alcoholic, but she had a lot of the isms of alcoholism. She had a lot of alcoholism in her family. And So it was almost like two alcoholics living together and trying to make decisions about our lives and our kids and everything. And I lived most of my life in Davis, California, which is near Sacramento. And we bought 3 houses over the years. And the best house we ever had was the first house we bought. And if we had kept that house all these years, it'd be worth over $1 million now. But we didn't do that. We thought the next house would be better, and then the next house would be better. And they told me when I was new, you know, this alcoholism is a disease of it's never enough. And I thought they meant never enough alcohol. But what they meant was it's never enough of anything. I have an unsatisfied mind. I'm always looking for something outside of me to change what's inside of me. And I was never very successful at that. So with this process of Alcoholics Anonymous, I had to change what's inside of me. I had to have a psychic change sufficient to allow, and the way my sponsor put it, he says the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous allows me, in my application of the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous in the day that I'm in, right here, right now, allows me to live comfortably without alcohol. And in the beginning, I thought it was just about not drinking. And I'll touch on my life a little bit, but I don't have a whole lot of time. I prefer to talk about what changed my life at 24 years sober, because to me, that's the most important thing I want to talk about. But I started drinking when I was about 15, and I drank alcoholically from the very start. I didn't drink every day. Of course, you can't do that when you're going to school and everything, but on weekends or whenever I could. And back then, you know, I'm 83 years of age, so I was born in 1942. So things were a lot different back then. I grew up in the 40s and 50s, and back then you could get anybody to buy it for you. It wasn't any big deal. And if you could find the right bar, you could even, you know, maybe dress to look older or whatever and get served. And we used to get served in Sacramento, down in the slums part of Sacramento. Anybody could get served down there. And so I was alcoholic from the very start. And you know, the book says my problem centers in my mind. And so it's not just what I drank, or I didn't notice if anybody was new. I guess you didn't. Did you ask if anyone's new? Anyway, now I lost my train of thought. Anyway, so I drank alcoholically from the very start. My thinking was alcoholic from the very start. And Davis was a very small town now. Now it's about 70,000 people. But back in the 50s, like when I was in high school, it was only about 7,000 or 8,000. And here's just an example of my alcoholic thinking and my wretched life. They had a little record store back then where you could actually, back then, you could actually, on 45s, you could try it out. They had a record player. You could go into a little booth and try out the 45, see if you wanted to buy it. And so I went in there and I tried out this 45, and I slipped it in my jacket or whatever it was, and I took it home. And some days later, my father comes to me and he says, "What's this?" It was a bill from the record company for the record that I had stolen, because everybody knew everybody. So they knew who I was. They knew who to send the bill to. And that's just an example of what I did. You know, I was a thief. I was, you know, all those things that we talk about. And so I guess I can't see a timer, right? So somebody's going to give me 5 minutes. Is that the idea? Oh, okay, perfect. My phone goes to sleep, so I can't look at the timer very well. Maybe give me 10 minutes. That would really help. So anyway, my wife and I were 20 and 19 when we got married, and she passed away this last March. And like I say, I'll talk about that maybe, just see how that goes. By the way, I think about, I can't help but think about what I'm going to say when I talk, but I try not to dwell on it. So before I come in here, I spend about 15 minutes just talking to God, asking him, you know, to help me put a message out there that people can relate to, that they can identify with, that they can benefit from. And so, like I said, I lived a wretched life. I was not a good husband in all kinds of different ways. I had affairs. I went places. I went places I didn't want to go with, people I didn't want to go with, and did things I didn't want to do. And for some reason, she put up with me all those years. And in Dr. Bob's story, even he says, you know, we alcoholics have a knack for marrying the strongest women. And I'm sure the reverse of that is true just as well. And I made promise after promise, and I never kept any promise, never kept any promise all those years. And I was, it was more than my actions, it was my words that hurt my wife more than anything else. And I'll just give you an example. You know, let's say I came home from work and she greets me at the door and says, "Hey, guess what? I painted one of the kids' rooms. Come and look at this beautiful room I painted." So I go back there and it's this beautiful shade of blue. And she said, "Isn't this wonderful?" And I said, "Yeah, that's really nice, but are you sure that's the right shade of blue?" So I was always putting her down, and they call that passive aggressive today. I didn't know what it was. It was just me. It was just my alcoholism. And what got me to Alcoholics Anonymous, I finally got a DUI. You know, I drove drunk all the time, and why I didn't get more, I have no idea. But I finally got a DUI in December of '94, so about 10 months before I got here. And I spent one night in jail, and I was driving home. It was a different town. It was about 45 minutes from where I lived. So I'm driving home the next morning, and I knew I was going to have to face my wife. And when I read that pitiful and incomprehensible demoralization, I knew what that was because I was experiencing that, and I had experienced it many times. And so, you know, I got home, and the next morning we were having that morning, because I spent the night in jail. So as soon as I got home, which I guess was around 10 a.m. or so, we were having that conversation, and I swore off. And I really didn't want to not drink anymore. And one of the first things that I heard at meetings was I heard some guy say he was sick and tired of being sick and tired. Because I used to try and think, you know, why did she told me to call my brother and see what this AA is all about. I have a younger brother who's been AA a little bit longer than I have. And so, getting back to that, I swore off, and I promised I would never drink again. And I really meant it. And I can remember, I wish I remembered how long it was before I returned to drinking. And that's a term they used back in the day, and I like it better than relapsed or whatever. I just returned to drinking because I can remember sitting there and really not wanting to drink, but wanting to drink, and wanting to drink, but not wanting to drink. And my head was exploding. And it was like in Bill's story, I sat in the morass of self-pity, quicksand all around. Why can't I drink like a normal person? You know, I told you my wife, I think, had an alcoholic personality, but she could drink like a normal person. She could have half a glass of wine and so forth. And I could never do that. And I never understood how people could even do that. And so she told me to call my brother and see what this AA is all about after I'd been drinking again for a while. And actually, you know, right before I got sober. And so I called my brother. He lived in Southern California. He said, "Well, go to a meeting tonight and then call me when you get back from the meeting." So I called Intergroup and I found out where a meeting was. And I went to that meeting. And so think about this. The only reason that I went to that meeting was because my wife told me to call my brother, and my brother told me to go to a meeting. I had no intention. I had no idea what AA was, even though my brother was in it. I had no intention of stopping drinking. That never occurred to me. The only thing I wanted to do was go to this meeting and get my wife off my back. But for some reason, and I'll tell you what the reason, I didn't know it for a long time, but at that meeting, the obsession to drink was removed. And God removed that obsession to drink. And if you look up a mental obsession, it's one thought overrides all other thoughts. And that's why, like Jim, for example, in the book, he goes into the bar and he puts whiskey in his milk because the thought, and it says that specifically on that line in the book, Jim thought that he would be okay to do that. And as I said, you know, my problem is my thinking. It's between my ears. And so, but I'm at this meeting. It was a speaker meeting. So the chairs are all lined up like this, and I'm sitting there. And a guy walks up to me and hands me this sheet in plastic, like we do, right, at an in-person meeting. Says, "Here, you want to read this?" I said, "What do I know, right? My first meeting, I know nothing." So I said, "Sure." And so it came time for me to read that. So he called on me to read. I started to read, and he said, "No, it's a speaker meeting, so you have to go up to the podium to read." So I went up to the podium to read, And as it turns out, I was reading the 12 traditions at my very first meeting from a podium. And I've never really thought about drinking hardly at all over all these years. And so how do you explain that unless it's God? You know, I have a couple of friends say, is it God? Is it odd or is it God? Well, I don't know if it was odd or not, but it was sure God coming into my life, and God's been in my life ever since. And so you know, I did everything that I was told to do. My sponsor, my first sponsor, was not a big step guy, and he was not a book guy. So I kind of did the program kind of halfway, so to speak. And I did what you people told me to do, though. I went to meetings, I got into service, I secretaried meetings, I chaired meetings, I spoke at meetings, I did all that sort of thing. Over the years, I was the district PI chair, I was DCMs, I was GSRs, I would all that stuff. But I want to tell you a little bit too. I'm sorry, I'm kind of bouncing around, but I can't help it. Things just pop into my head. I got my current sponsor, and this is what changed my life. And I hope I have time to talk about it because I don't really know where we are in time. But so I was at a big conference in Sacramento, and they'd had it for about 30 years, and I hadn't been except in my early years of my sobriety. But I went this time. One of my friends was on the committee for the conference, and he asked me to pick up one of the speakers at the airport. So I did that. So I was at this conference, and I can remember standing in line and talking to a friend of mine before we went into the main speaker for the banquet night. And I was sitting, and here I am 23 years sober. And I'm telling my friend, you know, I'm just tired of AA. I'm tired of the drunkalogs. I'm tired of the meetings. I'm tired of going out at night to these meetings because I was still working then. And for some reason, and I needed a new sponsor, and I didn't believe in long distance sponsorship at that time. I still do because my sponsor is now in the Sacramento, still in the Sacramento area, and I'm in South Carolina. But I was in the room, everybody just milling around waiting for the banquet, and I saw this man standing over there. And I knew him because he spoke around Sacramento and so forth. And I was just going to walk over and say hi. And I walked over to him and I said, I need a new sponsor and you're it. And he said, okay. He said two things. He said, you don't lie to me and I won't lie to you. I said, that sounds good. So he said, come over to my house on Sunday and we'll go to work. So I went over to his house and he said, we're going to go through the steps. I said, well, I did the steps when I was 6 months sober. What do I want to do them again for? And now, you know, he's a big believer. The book says annual house cleaning, and he likes to do it about twice a year. So I just did a fourth and fifth step this last week with him. And so, and he started talking about things I'd never heard before. He started talking about untreated alcoholism, which are the bedevilments on page 52. Sorry, I have a hard time with words sometimes. Anyway, go to page 52 and read the bedevilments. I can't think of them now. One thing we do look at a little bit differently. It says I couldn't make a living, and the way we look at that is not that I couldn't hold a job. It was that did I maximize the benefit of what I gave to my job. And maybe I didn't get promoted when I should have got promoted and those kinds of things. And that's the way we look at that. And he started talking about untreated alcoholism versus alcoholism. So with alcoholism, and I'm going to have that my entire life, I'm going to suffer from alcoholism no matter what I do. And we got through the steps. And then about a year later, we moved to South Carolina. And I was really struggling that first year here. And my wife had become ill. She had chronic kidney disease. And after we were here about a year, she went on dialysis. And it was a long, slow decline. I was a caregiver for her for about 4 years. And luckily, though, there's a way to do dialysis at home. I don't give medical advice, obviously, but if anybody's interested in that, my phone number's up there, and I'm on WhatsApp too. Because I can share my experience with that, our experience with that. And it was a long, slow decline, and she eventually passed on 1:03 a.m. on March 30th of this year. So it's almost a year now already in March. And she took her last breath. And Well, I used to get really choked up over that. I don't so much anymore when I think of it. But anyway, so getting back to my recovery, and my sponsor told me to do something, and I was talking about how uncomfortable I was and so forth, restless, irritable, and discontented, even though I didn't want to drink. And he told me to read page 240 out of Language of the Heart. And if you don't know, Language of the Heart is all of Bill's articles that he sent into the grapevine over the years. And I'm going to read a little bit. Somebody talked about reading something earlier, but I'm going to read this, and I hope it doesn't take too long. And but this is what Bill said in this article, and the title of the article is Take Step 11. And, you know, I never did much on step 11. Maybe I'd say a serenity prayer in the morning, but I didn't, if I read it, I sure didn't apply it. And like I said, my sponsor is so big on applying the steps in my life. But here's what Bill said about step 11. 12-stepping, talking at meetings, recitals of drinking history, confessions of our defects, and what progress we have made with them no longer provide us with release and the abundant life. And that's where I was. I wasn't getting any release from the program at all. And I had no abundant life because I was just discontented all the time. And as we usually don't get drunk on those occasions, our bright-eyed friends tell us how well we're doing. Anybody walk into a meeting and we're just really suffering, right? And somebody comes up and says, "Hey, David, how you doing?" And, "Oh, man, I'm doing great. Everything's great," right? And then I go home and get in the same fight with my wife I was in when I left home, you know, an hour ago. But inside, we know better. We know we aren't doing well enough. We can't handle life as life is. There must be a serious flaw somewhere in our spiritual practice and development. What then is it? And here's the kicker. The chances are better than even that we shall locate our trouble in our misunderstanding or neglect of AA Step 11. And that was me. That just hit the nail on the head. It said the other steps can keep most of us sober, but Step 11 can keep us growing if we try hard and work at it continually. And that's what I've done ever since then. And then you go to page 241, and I won't read all of it because it's a long paragraph, but there's a paragraph about half the page. There's 17 benefits that Bill lists there if we practice step 11, like he said. And says as he goes along with his process of prayer, he begins to add up the results, which are the benefits, right? If he persists, he will almost surely find more serenity, more tolerance, less fear, less anger, and so on and so on. And so that changed my life at 24 years sober. And so I do that. And also about 3 or 4 years ago, we started two-way prayer. I don't know if anybody knows what that is, but if you're interested, you can go to twowayprayer.org. And Episcopal priests restarted it about 4 or 5 years ago. And it's what they did in the Oxford group. And if you go to the bottom of page 86 in the book, it says that ask God for help and ask for an intuitive thought or an inspiration and so forth. And so all two-way prayer is the bottom of 86 in writing. And so I have a spiral notebook. I've been doing it now for about 4 years, and I've got about 4 spiral notebooks. And I kind of got away from it for a while, but I'm back into it again now because it's so beneficial. And so you just write whatever's bothering me very briefly. It's not journaling. It's not telling what's going on in my life because God knows what's going on in my life. And I just say, for example, I'm bothered by one of my kids who's doing something or not doing something. So I'll just write briefly. And I'll say, God, my Father, my Creator, my Great Spirit. And I says, I need help with letting go because I can't control my kid's life, right? So I need letting go and accepting what this kid is doing. And then I just put the phone down, put the pen down, and just sit there for a minute. And like it says at the bottom, 86 is the answers will come if I've tried this for a while. And it doesn't say they'll come right then because a lot of times they don't. But by doing this practice, these thoughts pop into my head during the day. And the rest of step 11, I love it because it tells us what to do at night when we retire at night. And there's 13 questions there. Was I angry? Was I resentful? Do I owe an amend? Do I need to talk to someone? It tells me exactly what to do. And then it tells what to do on awakening, right? And I didn't know, I was very fortunate to get to see Joe and Charlie a couple times in Sacramento back in the late 90s. And they never talked about when we retire at night. They only talked about on awakening. And so I asked God to direct my thinking, that it be divorced from self-pity, dishonest, and self-seeking motives. And then if you go through the end of that chapter, it tells me what to do throughout the day. It says to say, thy will be done throughout the day. And I add, not mine. So I say, thy will, not mine, be done. And that helps me immeasurably. And then I don't know if anybody's familiar with the Golden Key, Emmett Fox. And what I'm talking about here are not AA, but and some people don't like to talk about non-AA stuff at meetings, but I do, because I'm sharing my experience and what might help somebody. And it says in step 11, there are many books. We can go to libraries. We can talk to our priests and ministers and so on. So I include all those things when I speak. And I just hope it helps someone. And that's why I do it. And so I say, thy will be done, not mine.
You've got 10 minutes left, David.
10?
10 minutes left.
10. Okay, perfect. And so, so as I go through the day, I stay connected to God, and in the Golden Key, it says to say, God, I'm with you, or say, God, you're with me, or whatever it says. I'm not sure. And so I had a hard. I'm too lazy, I guess, to get the little book out and read it. So I said I was stressing over which one to say. And so I did that on my two-way prayer. And I said, God, which one should I say, or help me say the right one? And he said, keep it simple. Just say God now. So God is with me now all the time. And like my sponsor said, that in the day that I'm in right here, right now, because God is only here right in this minute. He's not in my past. He's not in my future. He's only here right now. And I'm going to talk about a couple of steps too, because I have time to do that. So that's all I'm going to talk about, step 11. But and we went through the steps, and he did it in a different way than I had ever been exposed to him. And he talked about step 1 being a 4-part step. We often talk about, or mostly we talk about it being a 2-part step, right? And it's a 4-part step because both parts are true whether I'm drinking or not. So I'm powerless over alcohol whether I'm drinking or not. My life is unmanageable whether I'm drinking or not. And he explained to me what we mean by life, because a lot of people think, well, I can get up in the morning, I can go to work, I can eat lunch, I can do whatever, right? And he explained to me the way he looks at it is the difference between life and living. Everything that I do is my living, but my life is my spiritual life. My life is what's between my ears. My life is what's my thinking. That's my life. And so my life is unmanageable whether I'm drinking or not. So I have to stay connected to my higher power. I have to stay connected to God. And step 2 came to believe that power greater than myself could restore me to sanity. And I always said that happened over time. And my sponsor says it happens right now. And I always thought it happened over time by taking the steps and living a better life and all that sort of thing. And what I missed there was the word could. It could restore me to sanity, which means it's possible. And so if it's possible, I don't need to dwell on it. I just need to do the work. I need to take the actions. And this is a program of action. And then step 3 made a decision to turn my will and my life over to the care of God as I understand him. And so many of us say, and I say it too, and I quit saying it, but I don't understand God at all. But what it means here in the beginning, when the book was written, when AA was forming, it just meant that it can be any God that I want, that I understand what my God is. So it can be a Catholic God, it can be a Protestant God, it can be a Native American God, which I'm really into Indian stuff. And so that's what it means by understand him. And some people say, they kind of tell a joke, that, there's 2 frogs on a log going down the river. Anybody heard this? And one jumps off. How many are left? And I forgot what the joke is, so never mind. Anyway, they say, well, if you don't take the act, anyway, they say the action is not in step 3, it's in step 4. And I don't agree with that, because making a decision is an action. It's, and if you look in the 12 and 12, In step 3, it actually lists a bunch of actions. Like it says, I came to AA and made a beginning. Well, that's an action. So there's lots of actions in step 3. And then step 4, we did the columns, and my sponsor does it a little bit differently. And I do too. In fact, like I said, I just finished doing it step 4. And we added a couple of columns to the right. And there's different columns. There's Joe and Charlie columns, and I've seen all kinds of different columns, but we add 2 columns to the right. And one is, if I have a resentment, how would that person see me? Would that person see me? Because the book says we have to look at these things from an entirely different angle. And so how would that other person see me, whether it's resentment or fear or sex inventory, either one, or any of them, how would they look at me? And so would they look at me being resentful? Would they look at me as being selfish? How would they look at me, which is oftentimes different than how I would look at them? And then the last column we add on the right is, what is the specific character defect that my actions were that include the resentment? And so we go through the steps like that. And I've heard different ways of doing step 5. For us, the way we do it, I've heard that some people just do a narrative of their entire life. And some people I've heard that even do a 4th step that way. But a 5th step, the way we do a 5th step is I just read off my 4th step, which makes it very, very simple. And my sponsor we just did it on Zoom yesterday, in fact, or day before maybe. So he knows everything that's going on with me pretty much all the time, because we do this a couple of times a year. Anytime I start to kind of feel off, so to speak, that restless, irritable, and discontented. And then 6 and 7, and the easiest way for me to think about those things, that I have to stop doing the behavior. Whatever that behavior is, whatever that character defect is, I have to stop it. Because God will not do for me what I can do for myself. I heard this just recently. If I'm locked in a closet and I ask God for a ham sandwich is not going to come through the keyhole. God will not do it with it. And it says in step 11 that God will not make us lily white. In the 12 and 12, God will not make us lily white without our cooperation. So I have to take the action. All this is a program of action. It's a very simple program. And then in 8, I make that list from step 4, and I have to dig deeper and see if there's anything else that's not resentments or fears or sex behavior. And then step 9, I go out to these people, and it says, not to get too technical here, but in step 9 of the book, it actually says 7 times where we go find that person. And I'm sure many of us, I know I've heard it, people say, well, I'll make amends to that person when God puts them in my life. In other words, when I run into him on the street, I'll make amends. Well, that's not what it says. If you look at the book in step 9, it says we go to, we find this person. In other words, I'm the one taking the action. And then 10, 11, 12 are the growth steps. I disagree with anyone who says maintenance steps. And Joe and Charlie emphasize this as well. It says in step 10, here's where we grow in faith and understanding. So if the book says we grow, we grow. And I know it's maintenance of our spiritual condition. I get that. But 10, 11, and 12 is where I live my life. And like I've already explained on step 11, if it covers the entire day, it tells me what to do. And the book says somewhere, specific directions. I'm not a big quoter. I'm not a big page numberer, but I do know a few things just from being around for a while. And then having had a spiritual experience, spiritual awakening, the first manuscripts, it's spiritual experience. The original manuscript is called the spiritual experience. And too many people thought they had to have an experience like Bill did, the big white light experience, but it's just a spiritual awakening over time from the result of doing the work, from the result of doing all the actions, and carry this message to alcoholics and practice these principles in all our affairs. And it's interesting, the original manuscript said, carry this message to others, especially alcoholics. So Bill knew that we had to live this life out there, right? It's more than the hour we spend in the meeting. And there's something else popped into my head, but it went away because I was finishing that sentence. Anyway, so I think my time's probably about up. I have probably talked for an extra 10 minutes there. So thank you, Basi, for the invitation. I don't know why my sponsor says it's my ego. I love speaking. It helps me as much as it helps you. Just at least I hope it helps somebody out there. It's just like sponsoring somebody, right? We say all the time, it helps me as much as I'm helping you. So looking forward to the rest of the meeting. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Dave. I really appreciate you coming today. And I got so much from you right from the start. And so much, but I have to process it now because I think, yeah, I mentioned that now it's all gone out of my head. But I'm glad when I got sober that it was broadcast to me that stopping drinking wasn't the answer. Stopping drinking was never the answer because my head was never right. And the solution was thrown at me. The big book was thrown at me from day one when I got sober this time. This is how you get sober. If you don't want to do this with, I was told, take your misery and F off out of here. And I didn't want to go. And my life was in tatters. And I didn't like the way that he spoke to me. But he let me think all this inside my head. And I was too afraid to run. And then he said to me, and I promise you, must see a life beyond your wildest dreams if you do what you're told. And I lived that today. I've learned how to be a father. I've learned how to be a son. I learned how to be a husband. I learned how to be a friend. And I believe I've learned how to be a decent member of Alcoholics Anonymous. And one member at Christmas, Frank Hickey, came down one night and paid my hall stairs, Landon's sitting room, all stairs, Landon's sitting room in the kitchen. And I tried to explain to him that I can't pay you, Frank. And all night I kept saying to him that I can't pay him, and all night he dismissed me. And at the end of the night, and I said to him, we loaded up his van. I said, Frank, I can't pay you. And he said these words to me, and I believe this is the big book in one sentence. And you mentioned it there as well. He said, Mossy, he said, if you really appreciate what I've done for you, he said, go help others. He didn't say alcoholics, he said others. And that's, I believe, what the big book is all about. You know, leaving a meeting, spreading the good word, being nice to people, try not to hurt anyone. And I leave it at that. Mick. Thanks, David.
Thank you. Thank you, David. Thank you for sharing for us. My name is Mick and I am an alcoholic. And by the grace of God in this fellowship, I don't need to take a drink today. I like what you said when you went on to 10, 11 and 12, that they're not our maintenance, you know, it's our recovery, I say it, because I am seeing and finding more and more about me, my emotions and how I react to things since coming into this fellowship, you know. I've been a very lucky person, you know. When I first came in, there weren't step meetings, there wasn't anything like that. They were always drunkalogs, and it always started with how it works. And we grew up, and as I've grown up in AA, I've seen AA growing as well, and going to step meetings and things, all different type meetings today, you know. And that has taught me today how to try and live my life the best I can. The happiest I can, because that's up to me. If I want a good day, I can have a good day. If I want a miserable day, I can have a miserable day. But I prefer to live happily in this program, one day at a time. God bless you all. Over to you again, Moss.
Thanks, Mick. You know, every now and then Mick screws up, and when I end up with two speakers speaking, and it's me that screws up, and I blame Mick because I'm allowed to. But every time that this happens, we end up with two fantastic speakers because you know, so it's a privilege to have you as well here tonight, Don, to share with us. And it's a pity your sponsor isn't here to keep manners on you, by the way. But there you go. I'll report back to him. I don't care about the yellow card. Okay?
Oh my gosh. Don, grateful alcoholic. Thank you so much, Mossy, for the invite. You're right. And well, I did put my name up there, Don O'Hara, because I'm talking to my Irish friends. Oh, that, you know, that apostrophe, if you've ever been on the internet, here, a lot of sites don't like that little tick. It ticks me up. But grateful. My sobriety date, 25th of June, 1995. I have a sponsor. I sponsor people. I heard that this one guy always says that that's a great way of reinforcing that it's just, you know, a chain, and I'm the loosest link, I guess, the weakest link. And yeah, I just have to write cheat sheets, you know, pause, pray, let God in first, and then proceed and go slowly. And God bless my father's aunt, a second grade school teacher, would yell, "You kids do not enunciate. You don't open your mouths when you speak." So when I go on ramble, I'm just talking on fast, because that's the way I'd rather talk, because I can't, like Jim is saying, you know, just, I'm saying, yes, I'm losing. I lose my thoughts and the words come out. David, I know, see, I know there's another David, but anyway, I'm so glad, you know, to be speaking to my friends in Ireland, you know, and Mossy, when you said you know, you were, I don't know how we got talking about Knock, but, you know, there's my holy water from the shrine. And I have so many memories. You know, my little apostle made of peat. And, you know, the reason I have these little treasures is because, you know, when I look back, I'm 64. I was born in 1961. Here's my highlights of my life, you know, born in 1961, great Irish Catholic American family in the coal region of Pennsylvania. So we were all set. Had my first drink sometime around 13. Yeah, I still remember it like it was yesterday. Mad Dog 2020. Ugh, it was horrible stuff, but it worked. And then from 15 to 30, it almost lines up full blown from the beginning. I loved it, couldn't get enough of it. I don't care what happens. And then from 30, you know, through the grace of God, I got in the program. But I like what David said. It's only the last couple of years, and it's specifically, and I'm going to point at him, there's another David on here. When COVID hit and the world went to shit, you know, and everybody shut down, I don't even know how I found it was called Good Morning Avalon at the time, but now it's the On Awakening group, 7:30 every day. And for whatever reason, you know, my sponsor, Brian D, you know, I saw him on there. I see him, he'd walk downtown, you know, and, "Oh, how you doing?" You know, I see him in a meeting. But when I said, "Hey, you know, how many sponsors what's your capacity?" And he says, "Always room for one more." I'm like, shit, now I'm on the hook. But he's tough as nails. And the reason I love working with him, and he makes me do hard things. And lately he's saying, "How's that step 2 work?" And I'm like, "What are you talking about, man? You know, there's different problems in different phases. So early recovery, you know, middle, and, you know, I even have a chart, you know, it says, are you in the maintenance phase?" And I love when David said, you know, never quit growing. He's like, well, step 3, bondage of self. And if he says that phrase, bondage of self, to me one more time, I'm going to scream, because he's right. And then he says, okay, you know, let's go back. What do you really think of God? And I go into, you know, I was blessed with 8 years of Catholic school with the nuns and the rulers and all that stuff. And 4 more years, Jesuits, there you go. And they were cool because they drank, you know, they were the cool guys. And then at the Jesuit college, I had a work study job where we were able to set up before they had their main meal of the day. So we'd stock the liquor bar, and we'd have to go to the basement, bring up a case of beer. And of course, one for them, one for me, one for them. It was wonderful stuff. But Brian said this week even, do you now, or, you know, that question, and then I'm like, David, I can't pick it up. Do you believe in God? Yes or no? Full stop. Do you believe in God? I'm like, no, I'm in the middle. Yeah, good. Most people are like that. So do you like the results? Untreated alcoholism. Do you still feel good about it? Like, no, because if I believe in God, then I have to think about Good St. Anne up on the hill and going to the novena every July, which was a good time because I was small and we'd put the blanket on and it was great. And then you'd see these guides, they'd wear swords, you know, the what were they called? The Knights of Columbus. But then now it's like, you know, F that shit. that's bogus. You know, I don't want to read anything from a book that's 2,500 years ago, written by some idiot coming out of the desert. You know, I'm like, where's this anger coming from? Because it just doesn't work for me. And he's like, all right, stop, full stop. He said, a simple assignment. And I love when I get simple assignments because I'm like confused as shit about anything. What is your conception? He goes, what is it? Don't keep telling me what it's not. Okay, if you don't like the Beatitudes and all of this stuff, don't tell me that. You're hiding behind your elite intelligence. And I'm like, who the hell are you telling me I'm elite? He goes, you are. You know, you think you're different. Write down what your creator, what your God is. And like, okay. He goes, do it like by tomorrow. Because he knows me. I'll kick it down the road. And I did. And I got like, okay. And all I could come up with is, well, it's not me. And I'm here. Okay. Something created me. All right. I'm done. And then there was a release. There was like, oh, okay. Now I don't have to think about it. And what it ties into meeting you all from, I even had to ask Masi, you guys not really on the Canary Islands? No. It's a cool way. But I'm fourth generation. I don't know when, but I know my dad was born in Scranton and his father. But I'm sure the great, I don't know how many greats are from County Mayo, you know, Kilshima, Bahola, up that area. And I have a cousin, and this is part of my story. There's a bar up in Kilshima that has a big cow or something behind the bar. I don't know if it's still there. I think that's O'Horace, because there's the O'Horas and the O'Haras. You know, I thought all these years we were the good guys, but actually the story goes way back. We were the sheep and the horse stealers. We had to run away. I don't know. It was all a bunch of shit. Anyway, so my story starts way back with that first drink when I was in high school, and all the kids, I don't know how we got it, but it was the most incredible feeling. Back up a little bit. So, you know, was born in the Camelot, you know, in 1960, JFK, you know, life is wonderful. And I have pictures of my mom, you know, this beautiful, her last name was Doherty or Doherty, whoever you want. And her, you know, Irish through and through, you know, the Murrays, the Dohertys, the O'Haras, the Message, everybody in there. And I love that, but I hate it. I have this really strong love-hate relationship with my heritage because it's me. So I'm one of 7 kids, right in the middle. And, you know, I was born, like I said, it was 1961 in Camelot. Everything was wonderful until I was 5 and my dad had a massive stroke, and that pretty much laid him out. He didn't die for 30 more years, but he was wiped. He could still speak. But back then they didn't give you this intensive, all right, next day you are up and you're working, and your work was like, all right, we're going to put you in this rehab for a year and then see what happens. It's like, yeah. I'll never forget, you know, when, you know, everything was started with lies. You know, what happened to Dad? Oh, he fell off a ladder. I mean, wait a minute. He's a bank examiner. You know, he'd wear a tie, go to the different banks. And we always had this picture of him climbing up on the ladder, looking at the books, you know, the old Charles Dickens. Let's pull off this book and look at it. It's like they had to lie because they couldn't tell us, no, it was just cerebral and whatever. So to this day, every time they take my BP at the doctor's office, I'm like, what is it like? He's like, it's okay, don't worry. It was and we never got the truth that it was something that was just congenital. It's whatever. But that fear of, am I going to be cut off literally at the knees anytime? That's a great way to go through life. So I'll never forget, you know, Mom took us all up to Allied Services, you know, where he was in rehab. And so the youngest, Richard, was just 6 months old. And then the oldest, you know, there's a set of twins in there. So from top to bottom, there's only about 10 years, you know, it's typical way you do things. And we all march in, and then there's Dad and he just pulled his sheet over his head. He didn't want to see it. Because to me, he was the guy who would go off to work and give me like 2 pennies. He'd be this proud. He came out of the Marines. You could hear him a mile away, you know, full of life. And then now he's literally has to walk with a cane, and the shame. And so that was our life, you know, and he, we had to move back to the other part of town. And that was the beginning of the end, because we were in the good side of town. You know, we were supposed to, Dad went back to school on the GI Bill, and he got his accounting, and we were going to move to Philadelphia and maybe even be, you know, he's going to go through the ranks of the federal government and make it, you know, we're going to be real rich. Nope. We had to go back to the house where my mother grew up when she was a kid. And this house was an old, you know, we had no money. And then just like, okay, you know, my mom had to go back to work as a nurse, and everything was just black cloud descends on everybody. But it was still fun because we didn't know the difference. Okay, so get to school, you know, the St. Anne's Elementary School, and where my mom went. And then so the whole west side of Scranton was a wonderful place to grow up. And we were the ground center, you know, 7 kids always running around. The backyard had never had any grass because it was always baseball, running around, bikes. And it was great, but there was always something in the house that was that horrible feeling of something's not right. And I remember, like today we have a lot of snow, it's too cold, but in the spring you get a lot of snow and it would start to melt. We used to love in the alley playing with our trucks in the snow. And a bunch of my friends, you know, was like 7, 8, 9, I don't know, but you know, elementary grade. And then my father started screaming, "Where's my vert?" He wanted his pistol. You know, he was in the Marines. He wanted his pistol. So he says, "I want to die." Because his, you know, burden was, you know, everything was up here, but he just couldn't move and he was paralyzed. And I'm like he could walk and talk, but he just, and to this day, that sound of him screaming, you know, so that taught me, get the hell out of the house. You know, it's no matter what is going on inside the house. You know, we tried, you know, my mom would have dinner on, you know, always at 1 o'clock on Sunday after mass and during the week. You know, she really held us together as best she could. But it was like after supper, where are you going? Oh, we're just going to go, you know, hang out. I just couldn't wait to get out of that house. And then we'd go down. Before I started drinking, it was just hanging out. Okay, you're outside hanging with friends until someone got some stuff. And that night with a Mad Dog 2020, then I learned when you don't feel good, you run. When you don't feel good, you run. And if you're fortunate, you have some outside chemical you can put inside and you're off to the races. So that was like 15-ish, you know, I was lucky, and I got through school, grade school, and had a work scholarship, not a pure scholarship, but a work scholarship to a college preparatory, college prep school, which 4 short years. I mean, I've been on work projects since then, which is longer than 4 years, but for whatever reason, the 4 years, when you take a fat, pimply old kid, Irish, you know, and put him in high school with the beautiful girls and the rich kids, and the kids come from the different areas and they have their doctors, lawyers, Indian chiefs. They show up in Cadillacs because it's prep. And my dad would say, "I'll take you to school." And he had this old, we had an old ship box. Well, gotta stop cursing. An old station wagon. That's right. At that time, he couldn't work, but he could drive 20 miles an hour. He always went slow. And he could walk slowly, he can talk. But I was so ashamed of him. I was like, that's one of the greatest amends I've never made in person, but I'll come later. I just, you know, graveside amends they're different. But that was get away. And the secondary layer of shame that is still there to this day is, you know, okay, I'm come from the west side of town, the poor kids, you know, Scranton, the whole coal mine, you have the Italians, the Polish, the Hungarian, it's a wonderful place. There's no jobs. So what are you going to do? You have to leave. But, you know, I came, and then you feel the snobbery and you feel different, and I'm different. I don't fit in. And here's the kicker. So the work scholarship, it was great. I mean, I don't know how much it was. It's a lot more now, but as much as I got shamed and I hated it, I first started getting really drunk when I was there. So yes, I learned how that, but B, the knowledge, the Jesuits, they really held me in good stead. I mean, but I don't know. There's me, my ego kicking up. But my little job at work study was helping the janitors. So you go through a day, okay, you know, there's a pretty girl, oh, you know, and the pimples and all that. But after school, everybody left, except, a lot of people would hang out, wait for the ride or the bus. I had to go around literally and pick up papers. And the janitor's like, well, get the little ones that don't get picked up by the vacuum. Like he was just, I'm like, are you shitting me? I have to go. And then there's, to this day, that's like red hot irons in my eyes of, and then that wonderful, wonderful day, it was like yesterday when someone, weed is my secondary, but it was the primary because it's like, wow, and then the first time, you find kids are doing it, you're talking about it, and we go out after school, but it never really hit until that one time, whatever reason, boom. Oh, it was like, wow, I mean, I could really feel this good and everything else goes away and nothing really matters that day. And then school was about 5 miles away and I would take the public bus or hitchhike. In those days you could. But I remember coming home after getting so wasted. And my mom just said, oh, you look tired. Yeah, I'm tired. So go up to the room, lay down. And unfortunately I put Pink Floyd, Dark Side of the Moon. Great song, except for the alarms come on. So, but it's amazing. I'm glorifying. It's like, wait a minute, it's not that bad. So by the time I was at the end of high school, and this is so fitting, it was a beautiful spring day. Graduation is 2 weeks away. Everybody's just coasting. I was a senior, he was a junior. So the bright idea to go out and smoke a joint outside the school. Didn't realize the old school, no air conditioning, all the windows were open. And this guy came running out. He wasn't the priest, he was the lay teacher. And luckily, I only just couldn't go to graduation. The other poor guy, to this day, I really feel bad. They kicked him out. I'm like, but I remember, and this is my dad, he went over to good old Father Renfret, and my dad was like yelling at him because he said, why are you doing this? I was at disciplinarian him in the Marines. This is not fair. I'm like, wow, he stood up. But anyway, I'm jumping around, but the point was, I can see only now that I haven't been drinking for a while and I'm not actively using it, but you can see I'm all tense just because that shit don't go away. But as I'm trying to make all these notes, I have to say, stop, God is in here directing. My father, I like how it's, and actually this is God's truth. I wasn't sleeping too well because I was kind of anxious, like, oh my gosh, I got to give my story, which is so silly. It's just talk. I mean, and I actually wrote down what my big fear was, that people are going to say, you're out of here. You're no good enough. Get the hell out of here. We want someone better. When the fact is, only from going to meetings, and this was a meeting we had Wednesday, or I forget, we were step 12 or traditions. Step 12, when you help people, it's right in the tradition 1. Once I'm helping you, now we have a group. And what keeps the group going? Like, oh, that's right. I wanted to write a big note to myself and say, it's not about me. It's about you. Because how can I help? Well, how's my time? At 2 o'clock. What time do we have till? Do I go to?
You still have another 20 minutes.
Oh, geez. I better start organizing that. So the last night when I couldn't sleep, and I'm all of a sudden there was a dream, and my mom came to me and was like, "Hey, this is odd." So my mom is real special because she was also in this program and died after. I mean, she had like 35 years, and wonderful. So there's a solution, and there's always a good ending, unless I pick up. But okay, I lost the thread. First drink, and then the shaming. And the reason why Ireland is so special and the love-hate. So my first trip, I was 12. Before I started drinking, my uncle, good old Bachelor Larry, and my father and me, and my uncle Jim Larry, was every year he would go over to Ireland trying to track down relatives. And I swear to this day, he had a whole list. He says, oh yeah, we're related. I don't know if we are or not. They might have just been nice, and he would bring over couple cartons of Marlboros and Jack Daniels, and sure, hey, yeah, Larry, we're relatives. Thing is, I don't have the documents. My brother Jim, who's, every time I go home, I'm like, hey, where are the notes from Uncle Jim? Did you keep them? Yeah, they're in a box, and that's as far as it gets. So, And the reason that's so important is because when I go back to, if God created me, who created the guy that created, who created my parents and their parents and their parents? And I get pulled back to County Mayo because that's where they say, we originated from, maybe. Haven't been back in years. I was there 3 times. The first time is where almost the final shaming nail in the coffin occurred again with my dad. We were, in those days, he's able to, we land in Shannon, and he was going to be, he could drive, but not a stick shift, especially because it's on the other side. So I remember when we were at the airport all day, they're trying to find an automatic, 1972. Did they even have such things? But we got one. And we were tooling around. We were having a good old time. And you drink a lot of tea over there, and tea for morning, tea for the afternoon, tea all the time, tea. And when you drink a lot of tea, you got to pee. And I remember to this day, there's lots of bushes. You just go on the side road up. Everybody's happy. Except the last time my dad wanted to get to the hotel. It was late in the day. And I'm like, Dad, I'm in the backseat. Dad, can we stop? No, wait. Can we stop? No, wait. I'm going to wait. And, and I'm like, oh shit, 12 years old, just wet my pants. And here I am. Now what do we do? And thank God, the jeans were really dark. And so I was able to but to this day, that shame of, oh my God. Fast forward, when I went back the second time, my uncle, I was 19 or 20. Now I'm the driver, full-blown alcoholic because, without getting it, I loved to just party and get drink on the weekends because I was still getting straight A's, doing good. And I just graduated from high school. And one of the top mistakes, if not probably the second mistake after picking up the drink, was when I mentioned earlier about not being able to graduate. I still got, or I just attend a ceremony. I got my diploma, and also I couldn't go to the prom, But I was able to go to the same hotel where they had the dinner with someone else. I got to go to the nice restaurant. Everybody else had the silly food, the crap. But I was able to party with everybody afterwards. So that's all that matters. And I met became my first wife after the party. And we, it's typical, you just get smashed. So that was the wonderful summer in 1979 when between high school and college. And yeah, I was living the life, working at a warehouse. Every single night we're partying with my wife and her mother and family. Oh, you can stay over. Don't worry. It's practically living it because that's the answer to get out of the bad house, where by then Mom started drinking. We'd wake up and they're like, oh, who left this half glass of beer behind the couch? Or why is Mom really having a hard time ironing? It's like, good, because she was drunk. Like, oh God, get me out of here. Totally removed from that. So magically, I'm in the throes of it, drinking all the time. Met my wife, and at her house, it's okay. Her dad worked second shift. Her mom loved, lots of people around. So of course, we're just going to load up, get a case of beer, and drink. Until I had to go. I was all set, and I was signed up, and I went my first year of college at New York University. With in a nutshell, I had it made. Partial scholarship. I had no idea what I was going to do, but it was all right. Living with my same uncle took me to Ireland because he had a rent-controlled house right down there in the village. It was ideal for someone, except if you're attached. He had a little tiny room, and good old Uncle Jim, he'd smoke like 5 packs of Marlboro a day. Killed him, but he was a conductor on the New Jersey Railroad, so he would get up at 3:30 in the morning to go out across the river and out on his route to come back, but he would hack for like half an hour. We didn't care, it's like, oh, that's just Uncle Jim. So I had it made, but I was so unhappy because Carolyn was in Scranton, 2 hours away. So of course, can't make a decision, only want to run away from when the feelings get bad, and drink. So that was a pretty crazy time because on the one hand, here I am to this day, one of my favorite memories of school was sitting around a seminar table at NYU in the classics department, studying Homer and ancient Greek. And I'm like, I was like, pinch myself. This is how people really go to school. You know, you're just sitting around laughing, and there's the, you know, some old scholar, and we're going line by line. I'm like, is this for real? But of course, I screwed up that, because once I realized, this sucks, I'm going back to Scranton. A typical day in that was in New York City. You know, it's amazing. I never went to any plays, never really did anything. All I wanted to do, you know, you get through school. Of course, I found the guys on college who had stuff, you know, and I found a room I could hang out with them in their dorm room. And then I would just go get 2 quarts of beer, 2-3 quarts, and hang out in the park and smoke and drink. And I was living, man. Another amend I have to make my uncle's past, but when I didn't have much money and I needed to get booze, he had a coin collection. So I dip in and I would just grab some quarters. I'm like, oh, quarters. I remember going to the deli. There's my 2 quarts of Bud, getting started. And the guy looks at me, you want to pay with these? I don't care. He goes, I'll take them. He just took them because he knew these were like silver quarters or whatever, worth like probably a lot more than the $2, but I could give a flying. I just wanted to get away from the feeling, sit in the park and pretend whatever I was pretending. And shortly after, you know, I don't even know how I was picked. My uncle's like, oh, I'm going over next year to Ireland. You know, would you want to drive? Sure. You know, why not? And we get there, and that's when I'm full blown. And I remember, you know, being in the bars and talking to this guy, and he said, yeah, I got some good hash, you know, and he dropped it. And I'm like, here I am crawling around on this, you know, the whatever, the sawdust and this stuff. And I'm like, oh man.
You've got 10 minutes left on.
Excellent. Thank you. And, you know, getting shit-faced and just drinking. And of course, I remember my uncle woke up next morning, goes, you know, why are there 2 full jars of, you know, Guinness? And even back then it was expensive on the nightstand. I'm like, well, I thought I might need them. And he just gave me a look. I said, that's what you do. You know, you got to stock up. Just drink. And then I think that was the same year when it was the most important thing in the world. It was June 16th. So you got to follow Bloomsday. I remember going down, we were in Dublin. So you start at Mulligan's on Poolbeg and you start drinking whiskey. And I don't know where I met some other guy and but all I remember is I fell asleep on the bus back to the hotel. Oh my God. And I got to watch because I can really romanticize that. And like I said, that's a bunch of crap. I lost the thread, so I'll stop. Yes, the creator. I'll skip through the jeepers. It was kind of boring because I did get back to school and I did graduate, and I got a job in computer science, working as a programmer, moved down here 2 hours south to the capital, Pennsylvania. And everything was great until my wife said, nope, it's not great. She missed mom, wanted to go home, all sorts of dysfunctions. So I had like 4 years where it was back and forth. I was on my own and it just got worse and worse. All I wanted to do, we worked, put on, first time I had a tie on, we used to wear them all the time, suits, go to work, get there early. Programmers used to like to get there early in case there was an issue, and just the rush home, 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Okay, now what? I won't drink tonight. Then you hear the tick, tick, tick. I'm not going to drink tonight. Okay, and then, oh, well, maybe just the first 6-pack. And around the corner, come out of like a mole out of the hole, get my first 6-pack. And within an hour, that's gone. Okay, now what? You shouldn't drive, but you're not that bad. And that went on, and it was normal, So I was so stuck where drinking every night, thinking it wasn't that bad. Every now and then I might go, okay, can I go without this week? And towards the end, I remember I used to keep like a black mark on this calendar and say the nights I got screwed up. And then I just used paint. There was my boss and another person in the office. We were real nice. And for some reason, we started talking. And then for the very, very, very first time, I was honest to someone else that said, I might be drinking too much. And she's like, oh, wow, maybe you should see a doctor just to see if everything is okay. And I go to this doctor, and the first time ever I admitted to a physician, doctor, that he goes, how much do you drink? And I said, well, probably like a 6-pack a night, maybe 2. And he's like, oh, okay. He goes, I think there's a nice place that's really going to help. You can get better, and this place is going to help you, called Marworth. It was a rehab right outside my hometown where my mother went. And I'm like, I was in shock, because by then, totally, I was ignoring the fact that she had her, went through, and there was the intervention, but we never talked about it. It's like, oh, okay, put mom in the rehab. She's better. She just doesn't drink. I'm full blown in my alcoholic, active. We visited her in the rehab, and I was like, I don't want to catch this. I better not come back. And seeing things around the house, like the big book, and I remember the pamphlet, the alcohol, or the something about the merry-go-round of denial. There's a pamphlet. I remember that exactly. She was reading that, but I didn't. So I just had to run away. And when he said, I'm going to be at Marworth, I'm like, oh man. That was June of 91. And it was the best thing ever. The 30 days, it was finally, okay, maybe we can get better. But it took 4 years. I'd get 12 months, maybe 15 months. And I was 2 hours away. And every time I would go back to Scranton, because by that time I was still separated, and I'd dutifully go up. But I had the thought, almost like David said earlier in the book, well, maybe I'll go visit my friends. What are they doing this weekend? And I walk up to the house. The guy had his house. And the first thing he said is, oh, where you been? You weren't that bad. Yes, I'm back. Back in the saddle. And that's all I had to hear is, you weren't that bad. And the next morning, woke up and said, oh, God, it's back. That overwhelming feeling of, I can't control this. Man, I don't know what happened this last time, 25 June 95. It was the third time I went through that. And finally, my first sponsor, I'll never forget, good old James, what are you going to do different? And then he walked away. He was kind of like, okay, you're back. What are you going to do different? He was kind of like, because I'd go to meetings and this and that. And to tell you the truth, from June of 95 up until, when was COVID, 2020, I went through the motions, never took another drink or any kind of drug, except under doctor's orders. And I thought I was doing okay. Finally finished, got the divorce over, got a wonderful new wife. We actually met, and then we've been with her ever since. The love of my life, takes care of me. But the untreated alcoholism wasn't treated. And when I heard that, this last phase, some days I think, maybe I should just change my recovery date, but because it really didn't do the important work until the Zoom type, this era of post-COVID Zoom. And my sponsor, he's close by. I did my, fourth and fifth step at his house, or, hang out. And then but he's busy, I'm busy. And it's like, we'll just meet on Zoom. It's actually, he's busy, I'm lazy. So can I text you, when are we going to get together? But for some reason, this untreated alcoholism based, and with how are you dealing with the God thing? Those two things. And like you said earlier, I like how you mentioned the two-way prayer, Emmett Fox, William James, all these different other things. And my sponsor said, how about, you're a smart guy. Why don't you, read Thomas Merton? And of course, I'm like, yeah, maybe. And the minute I pick up a book like that, I'm like, I get jealous because I didn't write it. And he goes, well, isn't that a little bit of bondage to self, where you can't, you don't want to admit that someone else might have done something and it isn't in your world. That's where my alcoholism is today. We go through all the bedevilments. It's like the latest phrase we go, I like to, it's a code word. I say, oh, yoga girl has been popping up. So ever since Zoom, we did a lot of yoga, and it was online. You had to shut down. And now it's that fantasy land. Like if I see a picture, it's like, oh, maybe when everything is going to shit in my mind, I'm going to find someone that does yoga, that's, studies Greek, and I'm also into AI and computers. I teach that. So it's like modern, old, does everything I do when I want to do it in my way, and then goes away when I get, I'm full of it. I gotta go away, which is such a fantasy land versus what reality is, because I'm back to where I was that little kid and life is uncomfortable and I just want to run away. Because the hardest question I have to myself is, where are you going to go next? We hear this is the house at the end of the block. And when Brian told me, write down the list of attributes of your higher power in the positive, don't list anything. Oh, it's not Judeo-Christian. It's not, my mom's God. It's not anything else. What am I? And all I could come up with, well, he created me, and he gives me the resources to do things. It's up to me, free will, and that's it. I have to stop, because the minute I start making it complicated, and I'm glad David's here, because I want to go and say, David, give me all the knowledge, give me all your spiritual strength, give me, and they'll say, nope, got to get it yourself. I will help you, but you got to find it yourself. Because when I'm on his, gosh, this is hard, because just me facing that, because I want to hide behind that, this Jesuit stuff. Oh, I'll just start quoting this and that. And if I, hide behind the big book and just start spouting. And I apologize if anybody, one thing I love about AA, we have to be able to criticize everything, tear it apart, fight with it. Otherwise, I might drink over it. I don't do it on meetings, because I respect meetings. Where I'm here in the meeting to say there's a solution. You don't have to drink today.
And you've got about 2 minutes left, please.
Excellent. Thank you. Because I'm stressing about, because what it boils down to is, I'm effed up here, but my creator made me wonderful. How do I get that back together? And I love when you said 10, 11, 12 are the growth steps. I forgot all, but I had all these things. I'm going to be wonderful. I was going to teach you and say, look at this, we're going to do that. But I will end on this, and it's this third step prayer. And I hate it actually, because it has a thee in there and a thou and this kind of stuff. But what I try to do is, the old teachers, the old nunny bunnies would, you write a sentence on the board. Remember doing, sentence diagrams? They don't teach that stuff anymore. Noun, verb, line. But I say, okay, God, I offer myself to thee. Full stop. Let's stop. Define your terms, buddy. What is God? I don't know. He's my creator. Great. How can I offer myself to you? Doesn't make any sense. All right. Work backwards. Build with me. Okay. Do with me as thou wilt. Okay. Break that apart to what you understand. Build with me. Do with me. Okay, like David said earlier, there's an action in there. What do I got to do? I don't know. Talk to my sponsor, and that's it. Stop there. That's, like I said. Nothing I ever talk about is new, and I'll steal this from Jim. I keep saying David, but God now, and I fight with that, because there's too much crap in here. Old messages that were laid in from sitting in church with my father's aunt Sunday. And it was great, because you get dressed up and looking at the pictures and the statues, don't know what they're talking about, but here's a lifesaver. Just don't, here's another peppermint lifesaver. So going to church is because you get candy if you're quiet. Anyway, I'll be quiet. I don't even know what I said. So when you do my little Yelp review, say, nah. But I love the fact that Mossy said, come on over, give us a show. And I love that. And then my sponsor, I think he shares like 5 times a day. I mean, if you know him, he's never shutting up. And he's on vacation, I guess. He said a lot of time I'll miss it, but he's tough as nails. And I know when he starts, he gets a little change in his voice. We talk one-on-one, and when his voice changes and his voice almost breaks, and he's like a little kid. He just wants everybody to get this. And I'm like, holy shit, are you okay? And he's like, yeah, I want you to get this. I want you to get this. The only way to get it is to give it. So you got it, warts and all. Thank you all so much for listening.
Thanks, Don. Lovely to hear you, man. And you know what amazed me about this program is there's so many different people here from around the world, and we're all different, but we're all connected. And we all get each other. You know, you spoke of a lot there, and one of the things, I mean, I know you're a sponsor. And I got him to speak for us a good while ago. And he rang me a few days afterwards. And he ran to see how Kathleen was. And I thought it was such an amazing thing. I just love what this offering this fellowship. And I can't explain it other than, you know, the kindness that people give out, you know. And I met you in Vancouver the night I did. I spent a bit of time with Brian and that in Vancouver, and just the welcome that I got. I just love it. And getting down to Akron and meeting people in Akron, and just that welcome that I get all around the world. And the chats on the phone with you with the last few days, and my mind is rattled with everything that's been said this evening. And it'll take me a couple of days to process all this, and then it'll all come together, you know. But I just love being sober, and that's the bottom line. So I thank you, Don. David had to go, because the meeting is kind of running over, it'll run over, but that's the way it goes. I'll hand it back to you there, Mick. Where are you gone?
Hey, I'm still here.
Good man.
Yeah, I'm going nowhere at all. Don, fantastic. You talked a lot about shame. I grew up in shame, a liar, thief, and a cheat. I was ashamed of my parents, ashamed of where we lived and all that. But coming into Alcoholics Anonymous, you taught me to look at inside myself to see where the shame was coming from. And it was me, you know. I thought I was someone special, different. Yeah. You know, the drink was the solution to my life. And I worked in the brewery, so there was no having to hunt around for it. It was there all the time. I worked with big drinkers, and I always used to say I trained to be like them. But of course, they were drinkers and normal people. I was an alcoholic. I was different, you know. And I talked to my parents in recovery, and I found out how their lives were. And I tried to be, and you know, I saw them in a different light. And where I used to live is talked about I live in a little town, and it's talked about of the street I lived up as a rough and tough street. And you know, and now I'm one of those rough and tough people in front of them, you know, not in front, I'm me as I am, but I mean, you know, I grew up there and I survived it. And, you know, and Alcoholics Anonymous has shown me how to deliver life to be there for other people, not me, you know. And I had a wife who was ill, and I was there for her. And she was a black belt of Al-Anon. And, you know, we worked together, and we brought up a family, and we got grandchildren. Well, she's gone now, but got grandchildren who like to be around me. And I was watching Mossy just now with his grandchildren, and it gave me a warm feeling inside. That's through Alcoholics Anonymous. I wasn't jealous of him because there's grandchildren there and doing these heart signs to each other. That warm feeling is, I've got grandchildren that I love today through Alcoholics Anonymous, and they love me. A life beyond my wildest dreams, one day at a time. Right, that's about it. We have come to the end of the meeting, and Jim H is going to read the promises.